questions we wrestle with as Christians about who God is, how do we live out our faith, what is the Bible, what is the truth of the Bible, what are we supposed to believe, how are we supposed to live? There are really big, deep questions that we ask each other, that we ask God, that we wrestle with ourselves. And that's why the Cultivate Podcast exists, to help us go deeper in our understanding of who God is, His Word, and the way that He's called us to live. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. And if you have been joining us for the last several episodes, we are kind of doing a series. We're kind of walking through all the topics that we covered in a summer seminar class that we did in the summer of 24 at the Grove. And so we're kind of doing series within a series, kind of covering all of these different topics. And Mark Freeman, expert on the gospel, the bridge diagram, and we discovered last week not quite an expert in world religions, but we'll see. I may have a different idea after we finish this particular episode. What do you think? Yeah. You think I'm going to have a different idea about, like, maybe more of an expert than you think you are?
I don't know. I don't know if I could change your mind. Huh. Can I change your mind? I think you already predetermined. Predetermined what? That you are an expert or that you're not an expert? Whatever your end goal is.
Well, no, you changed my mind before. I started last episode by saying you're an expert and ended it by saying you're not. You were not.
You're going to lose more respect in this one, I promise.
Wow, that's tough. That's tough. And so the question that was kind of put to you was really around, how do I interact and understand other faiths? You know, sharing the gospel with them. Am I supposed to do that? What am I supposed to do? Just kind of talking about all of that. And I'm not saying you sidestep the question, but it's like that question, it just means something different to you. And so the question that really you answered really was like, what is the difference between Christianity and these other religions? And so you just kind of really established with them the gospel through this illustration called the bridge diagram. If you missed it, you should go back and listen to last episode. And that really Christianity is its own category. Christianity is not a religion based on religion being, I work to achieve some status with God, but it is a gift that Jesus gives. And so you laid all of that out. Just for curiosity, again, I wasn't able to be there because I was at a conference. By the time you got done doing that, was there any time left, or is it like you were finished? Like, did you?
That was probably half the time.
Half the time. Okay, so we still got more stuff to cover here. So,
but then I gave another sidestep. See, this might. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if I want to ask you about your sidestep because I'm trying to get onto something here. So I was looking again through your slide deck, and at first you started kind of making sure everyone fully understood the gospel, that religions such as they are trying to build a bridge between us and God, a bridge that can't be built because of the holiness and the perfection of God. It would have to be an infinite bridge, and humans can't build infinite bridges. Only Jesus can be that infinite bridge, and we can only receive that as a gift. We can't earn it. But as we continued on, there was an acronym, and I love a good acronym, and it was an acronym that spelled out the word thumb. Mm-hmm. For the 99% of the people here who are listening who have no idea about any acronym that is thumb, what is the thumb acronym? Where did it come from, and what is it?
Yeah, I mean, among missiologists, it's just...
Missiologists! Sorry. What's that?
It is people who study missions.
Okay.
Right?
It's a good word, though.
It is.
Missiologist. It sounds like someone's name.
Yeah.
Not that ologist is a great last name.
Diagnosis, or yeah.
Ooh, yeah. So people who study missions. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. And it's just a way to kind of break down the different religions of the world.
Okay.
So the T is for tribals.
Okay.
H is for Hindus. U is kind of a funny one.
You don't get me started on this. I've been interacting with missiologists about this acronym for a while.
I mean, the freedom that they take with this is really kind of
go ahead. What do you think that U stands for?
Well, it's unreligious, but really, I mean, I think it was Chinese.
It used to be you turn the U this way and turn it into a C, and C becomes China, which is in fact, guys, China is not a religion.
My point made.
Tribalists, Hindus, China.
Unreligious.
No. Tribals, Hindus, unreligious. So atheists, agnostics.
Yes. Oh man, can I spell that? Oh yeah. Muslim,
yeah.
And then Buddhist.
Okay. And obviously there.
And then I add also those who have attached Jesus' name to a works-based faith.
I thought maybe you're going to add 2 S's to it.
No.
Thumbs.
I am not
and get
a big
Sikh and Shinto in there or something. Thumbs.
I'm not a big acronym fan, so.
Oh, you're not.
Yeah.
But
it is. I mean, it is effective.
Thumbo. Make the O for others. There's a whole because there's more. There's more than just those 5, but those are considered kind of the 5 major non-Christian groups out in the world that need to be most reached with the gospel. Tribal, Hindu, non-religious, unreligious, Muslims, and Buddhist. And so this acronym gets used to kind of describe what the missions task is. And 99% of the missions task is around reaching those 5 different groups. So in what context did you bring it up at the summer seminar?
Well, it felt like if I answered, if
all you did was share the bridge with them and go home.
If I did this class and didn't put those things on the board, then I would somehow, some missiologist from somewhere would like run me off the road on the way home. So I felt like I had to
People need to get their money's worth at a free event.
The numbers were out there. I gave some brief descriptions of each one, but I don't know if you caught it. But then beside each one, I put a name.
I saw that and had no idea. I was going to ask you about it. Like
this is my second sidestep, Charlie, of the question.
Okay.
Because the reason I did that is because you could take each one. I mean, for sure. I mean, the bulk of my interaction have been with Hindus, but I have also had the exact same thing happen with my Muslim friends, with my Buddhist friends. Haven't had as much interaction with tribal, but with unreligious I have. So each one of those names represented a different story of somebody that I know.
Oh, so those were real names.
Real people. Yeah.
He's like, hey, let's just make up a Hindu guy named Harry.
No.
It was like
those
are real names, real stories for
real stories. And that's important for me because if I lined up 100, we did a podcast on Hinduism, I think at one point. Right. And if I lined up 100 Hindus and I started to ask them the questions about what they believe, their practical belief in Hinduism, hardly any of them are going to say what I studied in the book before I ever interacted with a Hindu.
I remember that. It was me and you and another guy, and we did 3 episodes, and I tried for the equivalent of 90 minutes
to push us back
to make you guys answer a straightforward question with a straightforward answer, and you refused every time. And I remember at the end being like, why won't you guys just answer the question straightforwardly? This is very frustrating. And your response was, well, I think you've now gotten the full Hindu experience. That is what encountering Hindus is like. You just can't get a straightforward answer. And I was like, well, okay, well then I guess it was a successful podcast series. Exactly. I left frustrated and confused. So there you go.
Yeah, and I would say that most of my journey with this has been like I learned the academic side of it. And then I take it into the practice and make a friend and start to do life together and have these spiritual discussions. And I find out he didn't believe that.
Right.
She didn't believe any of that. And now I'm the one that looks like the fool because I'm talking all these things as if, well, this is what,
what you actually believe about the afterlife is this.
And then they're like, what are you talking about? There have been some awkward conversations like that. So I wanted to make sure in this class and any opportunity like this to say, man, you can know some things, but really those things are give you enough knowledge to ask good questions.
Okay.
But they're not, I would not call them the answers because if you lump a whole huge group of people,
here is exactly what 1 billion people all believe. They believe these 5 things every time, just like this.
I mean, would that be true if we pulled out, the people of our church?
Yeah,
and gave them a list of questions.
A sample size of 100 people.
They all got to answer the same way to each one of those questions, So for me, it was about bringing a lot of attention to these are relationships and these are people, and there's an academic study of it, but you can't take the academic study too far. Because if we're talking about being able to communicate the gospel, it's a person.
Right.
Makes sense. That person has their background, their experiences, what they've been exposed to, what they haven't been exposed to, their trauma. I mean, there's a whole list of things that make up the person.
Right.
And if you try to just put everybody in a group, you're going to miss the person, which I feel like I have been guilty of and have seen others guilty of.
Oh, that's cool.
So we just need to be careful.
Well, I like what you said, is that really kind of the academic side is just enough to kind of give you enough information to be able to ask good questions. So what I want us to do in episode 3 of this is to give us maybe some practical tips on how to ask those questions, demeanor, posture, how to bridge the conversation between asking questions, maybe to kind of share in your own faith, those kinds of things. But before we get to that, maybe we can at least get to the point to where that we do have enough information to ask the good questions. So we'll just work through the thumb illustration. So the first one is T, tribalist. That seems vague. What is that?
Yeah, basically the religions that you would find, and the reason I've had less interaction with this is because it's more animistic. It's religions that you would find out in the middle of nowhere.
Can you define that word for us?
Animistic. Animistic is more. I worship, which this falls into other categories as well, but I worship the river and the tree and the wind and also a lot of times animism becomes very, there is a very spiritual element to it where dark,
probably
dark
most people would equate it with superstitious.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a fair description, but that's probably what most people would say, that it is. The God is in the tree, the God is in the air, there are spirits everywhere, and yeah. So and animistic, a more spiritualistic, again, some people would say superstitious kind of view of the way the world works. There are spirits everywhere. I worship various spirits, and our tribe has certain spirits and gods, and your tribe has certain spirits and gods, and so I just want to make sure we had some.
Yeah.
It's a very again, missiologists use the word animistic a lot, but I don't know that's a.
Yeah, and I would say, believing that the spiritual realm is real.
Right.
The friends that I have that have spent good amounts of time in those villages, in those places, have seen dark spiritual forces in ways that you hear stories that you're just like, what in the world? And there's a real reason that people are afraid, and things that seem really crazy that you'll see on National Geographic are many times driven by some real fear that's there, but superstitions are good.
So you're describing this type of religion, you're using the word tribalist. So are these the kinds of religions, if you will, that would develop mostly in isolated tribe areas where it's like they don't have any real interaction? Would you describe it as, this is going to be maybe be offensive, would you describe it as primitive? Like what are we, are there people in business suits driving to work together that would?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Cut off. That's a good way. Isolated, cut off from the rest of. They seem very similar. You could go from one part of the world to another in village areas, and there would be differences, but you would find many similarities among tribes.
Okay. And so if our desire and our goal is to, in this series, to talk about how to interact with people from other religions, it does seem like the one we would least likely be interacting with.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in some places within a couple of hours here, there might be some Native Americans who are still really hold to Native American religious traditions, and there would be some animistic qualities to that. But even still, like, it seems like that has progressed to more of a great spirit, one God who oversees all of that. And we say the spirit of the trees and the water, we really mean everything kind of flowing from the great spirit God. Seems to be more of that than pure tribalistic stuff that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I mean, I don't want to dismiss that, but I mean, very few people are probably going to be missionaries in unreached tribes in Papua New Guinea or in the hills of India. So let's just,
right.
And that's what most people are thinking about when they think about world religions. Were you going to say something?
I mean, just that you might find yourself on a summer mission team to go take water filters to a place,
right, like
we do in the summer, and you're likely not going to be in a tribe that's out, in the distant. But I never went on this trip, but I was connected to a group that would often go to the Amazon and get on a boat and go up and down the river, and they would stop off in places and run into things. So, but yeah, you're not going to run in your neighborhood. You're probably not.
JB Hunt.
Yeah,
I'm at work at JB Hunt. And, right. Okay. All right. So
it's pretty tribal, but
I don't know how to respond to that. All right. T, tribal. H, Hindu.
Yes.
I'm going to try again, can you give us any sort of overview to help someone just kind of understand the simple basics of what makes something Hindu as opposed to not Hindu?
Well, first of all, I mean, Hinduism is to be from India.
It's
from that area.
Yeah. So you're not born in Alaska, raised. It's like, I'm gonna look up the beliefs of Hinduism and say, I don't think I'm gonna become a Hindu today.
If I actually asked a guy that question, he said, "You're crazy. You can't.
It's not possible.
Not possible because you're not from here."
So a Hindu can only be Indian,
right? Or Nepal is also a Hindu kingdom, but
right.
that valley coming from
Hindu is both a religion and an ethnicity, similar to Judaism, which is not in the thumb acronym. Anyway,
it's true.
Acronym.
How would you add that to your acronym?
Give me some time. You can make it. Probably need to make it an I. We probably would need another. THUMBSIS. Thumbsis. Buddhist. Shinto. Anyways, go ahead.
Yes. Oh, now okay.
Israeli Sikh. Anyway, thumbsis.
Good. Yeah.
Thumbs is thumb. What would the question mark be? Anyways, Hinduism. So it is both a nationality and a religion. Okay, so understand that. What are some of the more popular shared beliefs of people who are both Hindu in culture and in religion?
So there is a mythology of these different Hindu deities. Each one specific to different areas in India, each one having different powers and granting different things, different favors. And so if you go from one place to the other, those families would have an idol of that deity, likely from either where their ancestors were from, if they've shifted to a different place, or from that area. They would give worship to that idol often. More devout families, it's a daily ritual that they're a part of. Festivals are all built around these different deities. These deities have different powers and things, but if you read the stories of all the Hindu gods, I mean, you wouldn't find a lot of kindness and care. You would find a lot of cheating and getting ahead, and so you don't. Again, there's a lot of fear related to what it looks like to give worship. But
so polytheism seems to be a big part of it, and then gods are not loving. They are deceitful, hurtful, kind of like maybe like some of the Greek mythological, like a god's presence in your village is not necessarily a good thing. Okay.
So
then I offer it worship then to appease it more than to draw towards it.
Right. And because I need something, like, if it's the God that grants money and we're in a financial hardship, that's the one I'm going to give my worship to. If I need protection, there's a different one that I would likely give my worship to.
Okay.
Also, there's these stages of life. And so in your early stages, you're in childhood, you're learning about life, you're trying to find your way. There's a spiritual side to that, but there's a big chunk of your life that your way of being spiritual is providing for your family, taking care of the needs of the household. And because Hindu households are multi-generational and live together, many times the responsibility for your parents and extended family falls on the breadwinner. And so you're very focused during those years. And then as you get to the later years, you get more focused on spirituality as you near to death, and you start to detach from the world. And so there's a clear, depending on who you're talking to at what season of their life, you're gonna run into a different. Some in our age would seem very uninterested in spirituality, but they have embraced that as part of this is what it looks like to be spiritual right now. It's providing for everyone.
Oh wow, okay.
This is my act, and by this I am being spiritual.
So, having taken a handful of comparative religion courses, which we joked about last week, you would be the worst at.
Right.
Polytheism, caste system, reincarnation. Those are the three things that, if you're going to learn about Hinduism, those are the three things that you're going to talk about. You've touched on one, really haven't talked about the other two. How widespread is the caste system as far as being integral to the Hindu culture and religion? And how widespread is the belief in reincarnation?
Yeah, I mean, the caste system, it's outlawed. It's not supposed to be prevalent, but everybody knows in any room that everyone is sizing one another up, and which group that they're a part of, which family they're a part of, which station in life that they're a part of. And so just like I was talking about, the different seasons of life have different perspective, different focus. Also, everyone has a different job, a different position, a different place. And it's based on your family and your group. And so you should marry in that group. You should do what that group does. So
job-wise,
there's a reason why you go to hotels and you meet a guy, and it's likely an Indian family that owns the hotel, and his name's Patel, because the Patels,
that's what Patels do.
They do. They're very good at hosting, and it's multi-generational. It's their ancestors. It's what they do well, and always have. So it's very much still alive. What was the third thing you said? Reincarnation. Yeah. So the belief that this life is not just it. You don't just live, die, and it's over. But that one builds to another, and this long-term picture of what this thing is all about. It also affects people greatly. I've been to several funerals, and I've seen families cremate bodies without tears. And many times it's because of this long-term view. Yeah, this is a natural part of them moving on to the next stage.
Yeah. Okay.
And of course, your acts in this life then affect what that next life looks like.
Okay. Tribal, Hindu, unreligious. I mean, I don't know if that's really a part of comparing major world religions. These people just don't believe anything. And this is probably most likely who you're going to run into at JB Hunt.
Yeah. I've got several friends locally that
just don't believe. I just really don't believe in any of that. I'm just living a life.
Yeah, and I would say also with Hindus, I have lots of friends locally who wouldn't call themselves Hindus, but in the things that we just described, there are several of those things that they do. That is the way that they see life, and for sure this one.
So I am Hindu ethnically, but really I'm an unreligious Hindu.
No, I'm saying that people who would not identify themselves as Hindu, but in practice, if I listen to what they say about what they believe, might not involve idol worship, it may not, but there's elements of Hinduism that have really begun to become a part of our culture.
Right.
And in the same way, Unreligious, you would bump into somebody and they might not say that they're, full blown atheist, but when you start to talk about practice and you start to talk about, what they really believe, a lot of times that comes to the surface.
I feel like that's some way with, this is going to be controversial, I guess, with a lot of modern politicians. They can't just come outright and say that they are atheist, because that wouldn't play well with a large swath of America. So they identify with a particular religion that they inherited, but the way that they think about the world is very secular, very just, all that is, is the physical. It's not a very unreligious, but I gotta say I'm something, because atheist sounds bad in people's ears. Muslim. We also did a podcast, not you and I, but me and a guest that I had met through what was once the CMM, now VIA, who had been doing some missions work with Islamic Muslim people. What are the basics there?
You got 5 pillars that you're trying to accomplish. And again, giving a visit to Mecca is a big part of that. Your prayer life and the regimen of that, and being consistent with that. It is much more. It has a background. A lot of times people will call Muslims cousins to Christians, because the beginning books and the story is the same. They see Jesus as a prophet, but what Muhammad taught is, it kind of changed the direction of that. And
so I remember talking about this with my friend in the podcast, that people will say, Muslims, Christians, and Jews all worship the same God, which I know. I mean, if I want to assume that people are saying that in good faith, I know what they mean by that, which is a monotheistic, all-powerful creator God. So we start with that. If that's all it takes for us all to worship the same God, then we all have the same basic theological construct of a God at that point, but it's really not the same for a lot of different reasons. But their key prophet is a guy named Muhammad, and again, he kind of theoretically built on what Jesus taught, and Jesus built on what Moses and Abraham taught. But, Muhammad builds on that and teaches more, and anything that is different between, say, the New Testament and what Muhammad teaches has been corrupted by Christians over the years, not purely what Jesus really said. He didn't ever really said he was the Son of God in that way. And anything in the Old Testament that differs is the Jews had corrupted the text to make it say something different than what it said. So again, there's a family line there, and then there are a lot of Muslims that will connect the blessings of Abraham not to Isaac but to Ishmael, and that Ishmael, his first son, through his wife's handmaiden, that really was the one that had the blessing, and that came through there, and then ultimately through Muhammad. And Muhammad receives this vision, theoretically from an angel, and helps him find what the right path is, writes what's called the Quran. And essentially, like you said, there's these 5 pillars, and you have to, if you believe that God is one, there's God, I believe in Allah, and that Muhammad is his prophet, and then I follow the rest of these pillars, I have at least the hope of attaining afterlife.
Maybe.
I've gotten the impression that Allah is a little temperamental, and if you catch him on a bad day, it may not matter how good a Muslim you were. Which is why in some sects there is such a fear, then can inspire some fanaticism to
leave no doubt.
To leave no doubt.
Yeah, That's the reason why, like, a suicide bomber, you're like, man, what in the world? How does that make sense?
Again, I'm not trying to be politically incorrect here and say that all Muslims are suicide bombers, but it has the unfortunate side effect of inspiring that, because Allah can be erratic in his judgment over whether or not you're in or out.
Right. But I mean, all of them have that aspect that if it's based on works, again, if it's what you do, then, those among us who want to leave no doubt.
Right.
We will. I mean, that's the reason I would call myself a recovering legalist, because if that's what it is, if it's a competition, or if it's then my goodness, we're going to do this. And so what is the thing to do that would make sure?
Right.
And with each group, with each belief system, there's one of those things, or a few of those things. But if you did this, how could that person not be?
Right. All right. So I tried to nail you down with Hinduism back in the day, but if there's another religion that I feel like that is almost impossible to nail down in any real way, it's the B in thumb, Buddhism. Can you give me 30 seconds to understand?
Yeah, all of the statues that you've seen, this is the Buddha,
right?
I've spent time in Thailand. They got a statue. They change his clothes. They've got a big Buddha, and they've got a little Buddha. Little Buddha gets his clothes changed every year. The people come in and do this for him. Pretty nice of them. You'll see things offered to the statue. The statue does not look like a guy from India, but actually the Buddha was a prince. The
Buddha was an actual person.
Yes.
It's not God. The Buddha is not God. The Buddha is a person.
A person who, in short, and this again is from a lot of conversations, more than it is from books, but in short, believe that the path to joy in life was to renounce everything, to not feel the joy, to not feel the pain, to detach from the world, because the world was full of suffering.
Yeah, to me, this is going to be a weird connection, but to me, I've always kind of associated it a little bit with some of the philosophy and religion that you find with the Jedis in Star Wars. They reject emotional attachments, relational attachments, financial attachments, and they just devote themselves simply to the practice of doing good, but without being attached to anything or anyone. Mm-hmm. And I've never really seen a whole lot of talk around it, of just like whether or not George Lucas was intentionally bringing Buddhism into it, because I think that would scare some people away. But that seems to be the way the Jedis talk, and so I think that honestly is a good primer for people to understand the basics of, like, what would it mean to have no emotional or physical attachments to anyone or anything in this world. And then, but still from that, trying to do good in the world. Mm-hmm. And that's why we were talking earlier. It's really more of a philosophy than a religion per se, because there's no necessarily any God in that you're trying to appease, but it is the way to achieve maximum life.
However, and this is the thing that's really difficult about Buddhism, whichever place that you are, it has taken different forms around the world. And so I've definitely seen idol worship associated with Buddhism. Okay. I've seen ancestral worship associated and connected to Buddhism. I have seen monks in designer robes eating Haagen-Dazs ice cream when their leader, that color of robe and the purpose of the robe, in the original story, he stripped off all of his princely clothes and took the clothes from a dead body and embraced death.
Right. To me, the worst kind of Buddhist, and this is another hot take, is the American millionaire Buddhist. Which I feel like that most people, when a white American says that they're Buddhist, I think that they perceive it to be something chill. I'm just kind of more chill, bro. I kind of got more of a bro, chill kind of thing. But like, part of me is like, have you Have you read anything? Like, do you know? I mean, like anybody who is a high achiever and says that they're a Buddhist has missed something. I'm trying to be the best at something in the world. I'm trying to be rich. I'm trying to achieve, but I'm a Buddhist, which again, I think that just comes from a complete misunderstanding of what Buddhism is, because Buddhism is I want nothing. I have nothing. There is nothing, just a lot of detachment and nothing. And that's not what people mean when it's like, man, I find myself connecting with Buddhism. It's like, great. Can I have your car?
Mm-hmm. as you detach. Yeah. I found that usually they mean that they have begun to try to quiet their mind and meditate a bit.
Yeah.
And that's that. Then they throw the term Buddhism on it.
Yeah, meditation and generic spirituality,
right?
But not Buddhism.
But not well.
It's not Buddhism. It's kind of giving a New Age philosophy a more multicultural sounding term, but it's not. It's not Buddhism, unless you are intentionally poor and have no friends on purpose. You're not really. It's meditation.
Right.
All right,
yeah.
so go ahead.
Well, I had a similar experience with a friend from Senegal who was an exchange student, devout Muslim. He wanted to go to a mosque, so I took him to the only mosque I could find, and it was in Little Rock. We showed up at the mosque. We were there about 15 minutes, and he looked at me and said, "This is not Islam. We must leave."
Really?
So we went and got some food and headed back to Arkadelphia. Yep.
I feel like I need two more sentences to that story.
Well, just the version of Islam that was there at the mosque in Little Rock. This guy straight from Senegal quickly identified that the things that they're saying, the way that they're talking, that this is not the same Islam. This is not like a mosque in Senegal in all the ways. Yeah, and I could tell from the topics that. But this is probably not what you're talking about in Senegal.
Probably not. All right, so we worked our way through Thumb. The only one that I feel like is left is Judaism, which people think they have the most familiarity with, but also have the most questions about. People will be asking, like, do they still believe in the Old Testament? Why don't they do sacrifices? What do they think about Jesus? Those kinds of they have questions. It's probably one that you're probably, at least in the South, you're not going to come across a whole lot of Jewish people. You may be more in the North or Northeast. But we have a lot of questions about it because, again, we probably feel like, in the same way we're talking about that Islam is a cousin, we kind of feel like maybe, I don't know, we inherited Judaism, like we took it over. And so Judaism, if it's the way it is expressed in the Old Testament is certainly not the way that it is expressed today. I mean, there are reasons why they don't make sacrifices on the altar anymore. Because really there's only one place you're supposed to do that, and that place has been destroyed. And because of that, they worship God. They worship God differently. Obviously, they don't believe in Jesus. But I would say, by and large, for a large swath of people, it's very similar to our conversation about Hinduism. It really is more about my ethnic and national culture and heritage than a particular set of religious practices. Mm-hmm. There's a monotheism to it. There is a goodness to it, but it's not. I would not say that there's a whole lot of them that are still anticipating the Messiah to come, waiting for fulfillments of Isaiah the way that we think that they should be, based on what our understanding of Judaism. It has really kind of become more of a, based on our race and our ethnicity, kind of a shared monotheism with a lot of diversity as far as what it means religiously to your particular practice.
To practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've made it through Thumb-B. Thumb.
Well,
however.
And just to throw in there, I have also recently run into several people who combine those last two. Who combine Judaism and Buddhism. Because again, Buddhism gives you that freedom, and Judaism gives you this monotheistic one true creator God. And so an Eastern practice of that,
I had a professor in college that said he was a Buddhist Christian, kind of in similar ways. But I think mostly he said that for the shock value. He was something. Anyways, thank you so much. Next is tips and tricks on practices on how to, in a healthy, good way, interact with someone who is from another faith with the times we do encounter them. So I look forward to doing that with you, world religions expert Mark Freeman.
I lost.
No, you came back. You came back.
Oh,
no,
okay.
You came back. You are working your way up towards expert status. Apprentice, world religions apprentice, Mark Freeman. Thanks for joining us, and also for all of you, thank you for joining us. Encourage you to come back next week as we talk about more just about how we should be interacting when we come across people from other faiths. Again, thanks for joining us. Thank you for listening to the Cultivate Podcast. Our hope is that you are taking steps to go deeper in your faith, that you are asking big questions and you're looking for answers. We hope that we can be a resource for you through our podcast and any other way that we can help you. You can find all our episodes anywhere that you can find podcasts, including YouTube. And again, thank you so much for joining us.